Well,
Good afternoon.
okay, let's start with you, Asek, since you're here. Go ahead, ma'am.
Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for inviting us to this press briefing. I'm happy to present the program, the working program of the President for his attendance in COP28. He will leave Manila tomorrow morning and arrive in Dubai late afternoon of November 30. His first program there will be a meeting with the Filipino community. The following 2 days will be mainly his engagements related to COP28, and he will address the World Climate Action Summit together with other leaders, and he will also have important bilateral meetings on these 2 days. The first program of December 1 for the President is the opening of the Philippine Pavilion. Shortly after, he will be the keynote speaker in a side event that we are organizing together with the government of Kenya and the IOM Director General. This side event will be about the Philippines leading and pushing for a stronger global consensus on the nexus between climate change and migration. Following these side events, the program shifts to the central part of his visit, which is the engagement with other leaders. There will be a family photo of heads of states. So far, we are aware that there are over 140 heads of states, governments, and royalties that have confirmed their attendance to this COP28. There will be a COP28 presidency opening of the World Climate Action Summit, which begins at 11:45 that morning. There will also be a plenary in the afternoon, 2 simultaneous plenaries, and the President will be delivering the national statement in this plenary session. He will be number 11 of so many speakers in one of the plenaries, and in the same afternoon, after he has delivered the national statement, he will be attending a leader session on transforming climate finance. Following these engagements, there will be so many bilateral meetings that are scheduled, and I think I will end here. But if I may just quickly talk about the COP28. You've already described what it is, but this COP28 will take place in Expo City, Dubai from the 30th November to December 12, December 2023. So the biggest events will of course be the summitories, the World Climate Action Summit, and the engagements at the leaders level. But after the leaders have left, the negotiators will continue on to hammer out outcomes, including I think what we're waiting for is an outcome with respect to the loss and damage fund. I believe that Secretary Tony will address this issue later. The COP28 presidency, the president designate is Dr. Sultan Ahmed Al Jaber, who will take over from his predecessor, the Egyptian president of the COP27. And the priorities of the COP presidency will be to complete the first global stocktake, which is a review of how far we have gone as the international community in implementing the Paris Agreement. I think one of the priorities is also to set up the framework of the loss and damage fund as agreed in the last COP in Egypt. Also, high on the agenda is fast-tracking the energy transition, delivering and enhancing climate finance, and of course, resilient food systems. I believe that the President's engagements will reflect the priority that the Philippines attaches to all these thematic agenda of the conference. So far, the Philippine delegation, we have 237 registered on-site delegates representing 16 agencies and members of the civil society. And many of them will be staying behind after the president has completed his program for the negotiations, which is usually it extends beyond 2 or a couple of days beyond the schedule, because these are very important conversations. And perhaps I may end there, Daphne. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Assistant Secretary Almojuela. And now we have Secretary Loyzaga joining us via Zoom in Dubai. Secretary Loyzaga, okay, can we patch her?
Good morning.
Oh, good.
Good morning. Can you hear me, po?
Go ahead, ma'am.
Yes, thank you very much. I wanted to thank ASEC Lisa for that briefing. As you know, we are at a turning point in terms of the climate negotiations. They're very critical negotiations in this particular COP because after a long fight, we now have loss and damage on the agenda. That will be submitted by the Transitional Committee without question, I understand, into the agenda for the COP. So we anticipate at this point that there will be many issues relating to climate vulnerable countries that will be addressed by this loss and damage fund that Asik Isa had mentioned earlier. Essentially, the Philippine participation in this particular COP will center around 3 major themes, as already mentioned by Asik Isa, but let me just add a little bit more. We are presenting ourselves this year, having done our homework in terms of our biodiversity, in terms of our own renewable energy planning, and because of what we're trying to do in building resilient communities, we are centering our positions really around 3 general themes. The pursuit of a low-carbon future, which is sustainable and resilient for the country. Second is really using nature-based solutions and banking on our biodiversity to actually work with other countries as well as communities in the country on resilience based on adaptation, mitigation, and disaster risk reduction. And then lastly, in resilient community, we need to engage all the way down to local governments in order for us to be able to build resilience at the front line. So here at COP, finance is a huge issue. We are working on 7 major negotiating work streams: loss and damage, climate finance, adaptation, mitigation, the global stocktake, the just transition, especially of our labor, towards a renewable energy future, but also specifically our concerns about reskilling and upskilling of our workforce. And finally, what we call Article 6, which is how we cooperate with each other globally. So there are fairly complex negotiations ahead, but we are well prepared. I want to say that this is a whole of government approach. So we have, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, you're still on. Go ahead.
Yes. So we have DOF, DOE, DOLE, and DMW. We have DA as well, and of course NEDA, DOH, of course DNR, of course CCC. All of us are working together. We have a small Philippine pavilion, something that we are able to actually manage. But in that pavilion, there will be 32 major side events that will be co-hosted by everyone. So I hope that I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Secretary Loyzaga, maybe we could explain to the public what is the relevance of the Loss and Damage Fund to the Filipinos.
Thank you very much, Daphne. Loss and damage fund is extremely important because, as we know, there are losses and damages that are beyond our ability to finance. And that means if we have sea level rise, we have massive destruction. As you know, in the last super typhoons, from Yolanda all the way to Quinta, Raleigh, Goni, and as well as Rai, no, our Odette, the intensity of these tropical cyclones have actually crossed multiple regions, some as many as 11 regions whenever they hit us. So the cost of really trying to recoup and recover from this is way beyond what we are able to afford as a country. There are other countries who are similarly vulnerable, especially the Pacific countries. They are subjected to sea level rise plus the multiple hazards that are associated with climate change. So loss and damage are meant, the fund is meant to cover all the financing needed that cannot be addressed anymore by adaptation finance, by regular climate finance, by mitigation finance. This is beyond the capacity of countries. And therefore, developed countries and other sources, such as private sources perhaps, will be called upon to put their contributions into the loss and damage fund. It's extremely important that this become operationalized soonest and that we are able to access it in a timely and locally driven fashion. Thank you, Daphne.
Thank you. Any questions from Malacanang Press Corps? Katrina Domingo, ABS-CBN.
Good afternoon, Secretary Loyzaga. Ma'am, may we know the current emission levels that the Philippines contributes to the global emission average?
As you know, we are not even 0.5 of 1%. Okay. What we have also done in the Climate Change Commission and the work of the DNR is we've identified which sectors emit the most. As you know, energy and transport are the highest contributors. Next would be agriculture and then industry. What we're trying to do now and what we have managed to do is come up with two very important plans based on our greenhouse gas inventory nationally. The first plan is the Nationally Determined Contributions Implementation Plan. And what that does for us is really identify what kind of interventions are needed in order to bring our emissions down per sector. And here, as I said, the priorities, of course, are for energy and transport, and then as well as agriculture and then industry. What is important to note in the National Adaptation Plan, so you have two interrelated plans that need to work together. In the National Adaptation Plan, what is most critical is resilient infrastructure, especially for agriculture and food. And so what we have here are two possibly or seemingly competing priorities. One is, of course, to bring down emissions in the energy and transport and agriculture sector. But here we also have in adaptation the need to secure food for our population. And so what we're trying to do at this point, given that we are only less than 0.5 of 1% of global emissions, is really try to balance what will be the financing needs for us in terms of adaptation, in terms of the mitigation that we need in order to bring down our own contribution, which is very small, and then eventually try to see what kind of loss and damage financing we need to cover, especially for disaster risk.
Ma'am, follow-up question. Do we have a ballpark figure as to how much the Philippines would actually need aside from the existing 1 billion PSF fund?
Thank you. The PSF fund really speaks to the needs directly of the local communities. When we started to do the calculations for the emissions reduction budget based on our nationally determined contributions, and we started to do the National Adaptation Plan, unfortunately for us, this figure is in the trillions. We are not alone. Many of the small countries as well are also needing a great deal of assistance, both for adaptation and mitigation. And the real, I think, challenge for us, as well as the opportunity, is the DOF has been working very, very closely with all the different partners internationally to tailor our needs to the financing that needs to be made available. So just to be clear, what we need to make available is not development financing. That is one track. There's climate financing now. As you know, there are bonds, there are different grants and subsidies. However, loss and damage fund, which is really for those losses and damages that are beyond our capacity, is critical for this particular COP to actually make happen.
Secretary, would you be able to share with us if the top emitting countries are favorable towards funding the loss and damage fund?
At this point, there has been a very contentious process, but in the spirit of cooperation, as you know, or as you may know, a transitional committee, what they call a transitional committee, was formed to address loss and damage fund. And what will emerge from this committee and has emerged is really a declaration of principle and direction. Now we need to operationalize. So a great deal of support has been put towards the developed countries really making themselves, how do I say, more accessible in terms of the contributions to this fund. There are many discussions that are ongoing. Some are more inclined than others. However, we will really rely on our diplomatic as well as our other kinds of relationships with the different countries to make sure that we can somehow encourage the contributions from developed countries. What's also important is the loss and damage fund may be broadly based. So not just the developed countries, there may be opportunities for the international financial organizations, there may be opportunities for private sector philanthropies to actually also contribute to this fund. All of this is part of what will be negotiated now in this COP.
That's great. Jean Mangaluz, Inquirer.net.
Good afternoon.
Go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. Can you ask how will the Loss and Damage Fund visibly manifest to Filipinos?
Thanks very much, Jean. So in fact, for us, we hope, and this is where all the negotiations still are ongoing, and that's why it's extremely important for us to be present here. We hope that this will come in the form of additional social development funding, funding for resilient infrastructure, so that in fact we can avoid the kind of destruction that we are already facing and have faced in the past. And therefore, that kind of infrastructure can support the different development priorities that are given to us under the PDP. Directly, the social part of it is the one that is most important. And that is why we need to actually work to negotiate the terms of the operationalization and what kind of financing will in fact be able to be availed of by the developing countries that are most climate vulnerable.
Okay. Ivan Myrina, GMA 7. Katrina, the mic, please.
Hi, Secretary. Good afternoon. Like you said, the contentious issues with regard to loss and damage is on the contributions. Which countries are supposed to contribute and by how much? What is the Philippines' position on this, Madam?
Well, as you know, we have always ascribed to the principle of common but differentiated responsibility and respective capacities. So that is the underlying principle. So for us, developed countries should contribute to the loss and damage fund, and those that are also high emitting. So that would be one of the principles. Secondly, we are open to other sources of funding other than sovereign sources. And the real issue here is many of the developed countries themselves have their own priorities. And some of them are actually not in a great financial position as well. And so what we're trying to do is make broadly based financing one of the approaches as well for the loss and damage fund, so that we are not caught up by the sovereign arguments that they cannot afford it because they have other concerns and priorities in terms of their own financing for their own objectives. No? So as far as we are concerned, the principle of common but differentiated responsibility, therefore, that lies with the developed countries. However, we are open to broadening the sources, and that's where the use of private sector funding, the use of innovative financing from the different international financial organizations is actually the most important as well.
Sorry. Ma'am, I'd like to take advantage of my turn to ask, although this is a domestic issue, I understand the two projects of the Pasay Eco City reclamation has been given the green light already to resume reclamation activities. May we know the basis of this decision, ma'am?
Ivan, thank you. No, just to clarify for everyone, I said from the beginning, in fact, to this group as well, so I hope you will recall, there are two processes that the DNR is undertaking. The first one is the compliance review process. No? The compliance review process is taking a look at the ECC and the area clearances of all those that were given the go-ahead to see whether they have actually complied with the conditions. Some of the ECC and area clearance terms were given on certain conditionalities. And so we are trying to, in fact, address the compliance to those conditionalities, not in the post, but now, no, in terms of the review process. The second process, if you will recall, is the cumulative impact assessment. This is the scientific analysis needed in order for us to determine what is the cumulative impact of all of these projects in terms of the fulfillment of the mandamus order by the DNR as the lead implementing agency. So what we are able to do is evaluate and assess compliance. We do not suspend, we do not lift the suspension. That is a matter for the PRA.
Okay. Jean Mangaluz.
Hi, ma'am. I'd like to follow up on Sir Ivan's question. So are you saying explicitly that these two projects, these two reclamation projects have passed these qualifications from the DNR?
There were several technical conferences called because there were some findings and observations. And after they complied with what was required, documentation-wise, and then review-wise as well, overall, the DNR actually submitted a report, and they had in fact substantially complied.
Okay. Any other questions about COP28? Katrina, please.
Thank you.
Hi, ma'am. In 2021, the Philippines has set its NDC to a 75% GHG. May we know how far we are at reaching that goal?
So the NDC actually provides for a reduction of 75% of our GHG emissions conditionally. And the second one would be the 25%, which we were somehow I would say committed to. That those figures, actually, just to recall, didn't come in 2021. They came much sooner. Those were figures that were released during the Aquino administration. So what we are trying to do at this point is we're doing a thorough review of our GHG inventory, looking at the implications as far as the implementation of what we will need to do as committed under the old figures, this 75-25, okay? And looking at the adaptation cost as well. So here we are at a point where we actually need to review the 75-25 as well. So as far as our own performance, it has not really shifted. We remain at the levels that we were, less than 0.5 of 1%.
Okay. Follow up?
Ma'am, for ASEC, Teresa, ma'am, you mentioned that the president will hold several bilateral meetings on the sidelines of COP28. May we know which countries have already confirmed these meetings with our president?
At this point, these bilateral meetings are subject of consultations, and I think we will have more clarity on which meetings will actually take place.
But around how many countries are we talking about?
Maybe a dozen or more, because some of these requests are made in the venue during at the sidelines, so we're not sure at this time. But right now we're working on a dozen bilateral meetings for the president.
You mentioned the sidelines and also Secretary Loyzaga. We have a pavilion, you said. Could you tell us a little bit more about what side events you are planning?
Yes, well, thank you very much, Daphne. And you know, when we use the word pavilion, I'd like to, it has a rather grand connotation, but we have a rather modest one. It's just over 100 square meters. And what we are able to do there is host side events, as I mentioned earlier. So the pavilion actually be opened by the president himself. And so we're very grateful for that, because otherwise we would not have the kind of attention we feel, no, in terms of what will go on in the pavilion. So in the pavilion, there will be side events by the DOST, which will be showcasing its own science and technology achievements in terms of climate data and risk governance. We have a number of events with the DOF, with Secretary Ben Diokno, actually with panels consisting of our partners, the ADB and other financial organizations. We have DOE hosting a number of events. I believe there are 4, if I'm not mistaken, on the Energy Day. We have the DEA also featuring sustainable agriculture and climate resilient agriculture. So DOH also has a number of events on health systems and climate. We have a number of nature-based panels that will also be at the side events. Then DNR has taken a role in that. All in all, there are 32 side events that will be held. Each day of the negotiations, there is a specific theme that the UNFCCC has outlined. So we have followed that theme. We also have several panels on gender and climate and resilience of women in particular. And there is a day for youth as well. And so we do have a youth representative on the delegation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Secretary. Any other questions? Alan Francisco, PTV4.
Hi, Sec. Good afternoon. Philippines as a typhoon-prone country, how important for other countries who will attend the COP 2028 to listen to our positions on climate-related matters?
Thanks very much. That's a great question. The Philippines is one of the climate vulnerable countries, no? So we are actually part also of the G77, so the group of developing countries, no? I think it was extremely important for us to be heard by other countries, because what we're trying to do at this point is really approach our climate resilience by twinning adaptation, mitigation, and I should say a third leg, the disaster risk reduction. And that will involve the social, economic, environmental, and scientific efforts of our whole of government. So what we have managed to do under this administration, because the president is one of those who have actually really supported the integration of climate into the different policy areas of the different departments, and he understands the link between climate, biodiversity, pollution, and sustainable development. This integrated messaging and the integrated approach that we are trying to now marshal as a country, we hope will inspire others as well. And we have achieved some recognition on this, even on our work on oceans and biodiversity. We will be speaking at a number of panels, also side events of other organizers here at the COP. And particularly, they have asked DNR, myself, to speak on oceans and climate, on minerals and climate. Especially, this is a group that is led by the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, or EITI, and of course, a number of nature-based panels as well. And of course, the innovative financing that needs to go into this work related to loss and damage and adaptation. And so there is recognition. I should add one particular effort that is also recognizing the work that's being done in the Philippines, and it's the work on green shipping and how we might be able to support the reskilling and upskilling of our seafarers and those working in the energy sector. The DOE is a very strong partner here and leader, and we have been speaking in several forums, especially about our seafarers and how they will need to be able to be reskilled and upskilled for the changes in the shipping industry. So marami pong intersecting themes that we are also being asked to speak at. I will be speaking at about 10 different side events of others po on these different areas that they have recognized the Philippines to have made headway on. Salamat po.
Thank you. Anything else? We're good? I think we're done. Thank you so much, Secretary Loyzaga, and we wish you all the best in representing our country, being one of the most vulnerable to climate change. Napaka-importante nito para sa ating mamamayan dahil alam naman natin na tayo ang pinaka-naaapektuhan ng pag-init ng mundo. So we wish you all the best and thank you so much again, Secretary Loyzaga and Assistant Secretary Almojuela. Thank you. Magandang hapon, Malacanang Press Corps. Thank you.